Hi, I'm Dr. Brian Kaufman, a retired family doctor and the co-founder, chief medical officer, and the executive vice president of the nonprofit CLL Society. Peter,
Thank you for having me today, Doctor.
you want to introduce yourself and just tell us
Sure.
a little bit about your CLL background?
Okay. My CLL background, I was diagnosed approximately 4.5 years ago and went through various BTK inhibitors and each in turn eventually lost its efficacy. And uh, it was in January of this year when the disease returned, and it was clear that I needed something beyond a BTK inhibitor in order to put it in check.
So the BTK inhibitors are the oral medications that are one of the most commonly used drugs and extremely effective. But what your case tells us is, which is true for almost everyone, is all these treatments in CLL are palliative. Eventually everybody relapses at some point. Some people get a year, some people get 10 years, but almost everyone at some point relapses. So you've taken the best line of drugs, you've done okay, you've gotten some time out of them, and your docs are saying they're not going to work anymore or they're stopped working. So what was that like for you emotionally at that time to say, what's going on here?
Um, it was a blow, but surprisingly, I didn't. It didn't get me down as much as I thought it would. I guess because I did have confidence in that there were alternatives available. And initially, my oncologist at Johns Hopkins suggested that we try the stem cell transplant. So I braced myself for that. But unfortunately, when I had a PET scan, it showed that the disease had progressed too far for that to be a really viable or effective alternative. And fortuitously, the FDA, of course, approved CAR T therapy for CLL. I guess it was sometime in March, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Let's go with that. That looks like it's very very good option for you." And so I agreed to that. I mean, I really didn't see any alternative to agreeing to that, despite some of the potential side effects. And we we went ahead with it in late May, about a little over 2 months ago.
So let's talk just for a second there too. Did you know what CAR T was? I know in your you have a full life outside of having CLL, and one of your areas of expertise is researching something, digging in deep. So did you do that when was CAR T brand new to you? You'd never heard the words
It was
before?
new to me. I never heard of it, but frankly, it's not that I'm not aggressive when it comes to matters of my own health and trying to know uh, know what exactly is going on and what's being recommended. But I didn't. I mean, once I learned the fundamentals of it, read on the fundamentals and some of Johns Hopkins videos and literature. And then speaking with you, I didn't want to dig too deep. I took the approach of, well, okay, looks like the best alternative. I don't want to go too deep. I don't want to obsess. I've accepted that this is looks like the best alternative. I'm not going to obsess and make it my life between that moment and when I actually had CAR T therapy. And surprisingly, I wasn't that concerned. Now, if I had known what some of the side, if I had known beforehand how I would respond in terms of side effects, I might have been a little more apprehensive. But I wasn't beforehand.
Now, CAR T is not a single journey, and your doctor's involved. you have a care partner who can help
My
you through
wife,
it. And
yes.
was she part of this decision? How did the two of you talk about that?
She was, in fact, she was more aggressively researching it than I. In fact, she immediately joined the local chapter of the CLL Society. I've subsequently become a member, participating in the monthly meetings and whatnot, and in turn reaching out to others who've been, who I've been asked to talk to about it. So I mean, she frankly knew more about it when it came decision point time, and between then and the therapy than I did. She was marvelous. And I guess it was sort of a relief knowing that, I trust my wife's judgment. She's really digging into this, so I'll just piggyback off that.
So it's really kind of a space age therapy, isn't it? When you think about what's going on here, it's very cutting edge. So tell us a little bit about your experience. What that was like for you. You've made the decision now, and you kind of jump in. And I remember when I made my decision for CAR T, it was kind of okay. There's other options, but this is the one I've chosen. So I'm just not going to look back. I'm just going to move forward. What was that like? What was that? There's a screening that you have to go through. Walk us through all those steps, because it's just like you have CAR T. Okay, I'll see you on Thursday. We'll do the CAR T and it's done. It's not. It's a much more involved process.
Right. And to be frank with you right now, I can't recollect some of the preliminary steps. Maybe I intentionally put them out of my mind, but I do recall that quite vividly. This was surprising. The day they took blood for me to have the T cells transformed
Right.
genetically, that spent maybe 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours, while they drew blood, and all that came out from the process was one small bag of blood. And I thought, gosh, 4 or 5 hours for that, okay. But it just seemed very low key. There was no pain involved, nothing of that sort. And then when
I'm going to stop you there for a second.
sure.
That's where they have a vein in both arms, right? Like two different veins, and they're taking the blood out and returning it. The apheresis, where they're spinning off, it kind of runs through a centrifuge,
Yeah, exactly.
spinning off
Collect,
cells that
yeah,
they're going to genetically engineer.
right.
Yeah,
And it was very easy, painless process. And when the uh, uh, CAR T cells, came back from the lab, and I had the day of the therapy. Again, I was surprised. It looked like I was just getting a bag of plasma. It was intravenous. It didn't take all that long, and I it almost seemed anticlimactic, given the run up to the therapy. And and I should say, though, prior to the actual therapy, I went through 3 days of chemotherapy, and the dosage or was low enough that, as you can see, I didn't lose a single strand of hair, which I guess I'm a little vain, but I was happy at that.
yeah, and the chemo is so your own immune system doesn't reject the CAR T cells that have been genetically modified to recognize and attack the T cells. Do
Kind of
you
open the door and give some room for them too, I guess.
try to clean out some space for them? And I imagine before all of this did some of the screening, you would have had screening. You probably had an EKG and
Yes,
scans and a bone marrow biopsy to get the
right,
baseline of
right.
all of them. Sometimes they do pulmonary tests, and depending on, just to see where your baseline is. Do you remember roughly how long it took from okay, let's get the CAR T, to getting into the chair to get the T cells drawn off, and then from when the T cells were drawn off, how soon you got your CAR T cells? Because there's a wait there. It's not like the next day it
Right.
takes to manufacture these.
Well, I was fortunate that, of course, there's always the wait for the insurance company to approve it, and the therapy had just again been approved a few weeks earlier by the FDA, but my insurance company responded, I mean, immediately, and approved the therapy. So that wait was very brief. But and so within, I think within a week or two after deciding upon CAR T therapy, I was in the chair having the T cells drawn, so to speak. And then between that and then the actual therapy, I recall, if I recall correctly, it was approximately 4 weeks for the T cells to be genetically modified at a laboratory and then returned to Hopkins.
And it is anticlimactic, isn't it? It's like, and nothing happens. Like, I mean, at least when I got mine, I didn't have any reaction. It's nothing. It's not like, Spider-Man getting bitten by the, radioactive spider or something. It's like nothing happens. You're the same person when you walk out, right?
Right. In fact, I didn't feel any of the side effects that I was told were likely until um, 3 days afterwards, which my oncologist told me was actually rather rapid. You apparently
Right.
you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's often a week or so before you feel the first effects, but they hit me almost immediately.
Yeah, I was about a week out before it hit me, and that's because the cells are kind of dormant. They're getting used to their new home, and then they start to expand, and then they go on a killing frenzy later, and that's when you get the adverse event. So, what happened at day 3 or 4, and and if you could also let us know where were you in hospital during this, or were you?
No, I fortunately Hopkins, and I don't know if this is unique to Hopkins or not, but they have what they call an IPOP, inpatient outpatient uh, facility. It's right there in Hopkins uh, larger medical center, and if you don't have a fever or show any other severe reactions, then you go in every day for a month, and you're in there. You're having your blood checked and whatever else we need to do for a few hours, and then you go home. And that's if you live within a 1 hour radius of Hopkins. Unfortunately, we did. So optimally, if my side effects had not worsened, I would have just been doing strictly inpatient, outpatient. But in my case, the fever exceeded the what they consider the safe limit, 100.5, and so they admitted me to Hopkins and until the fever broke. And apparently, the rationale there is that things can change on a dime with your CAR T uh, reaction, and the fever could suddenly spike. And if I were at home, they would lose valuable time. So once it did, in fact, 2 of the 3 times that I was admitted, each case was only for a couple of days to get the fever back under control. I was admitted from IPOP, from inpatient outpatient, right across the hall to this, not to the general hospital population, but rather to a small ward designed strictly for CAR T and other transplant patients. So that gave me a much better feeling than I would have had if I were jettisoned into the general hospital population, where of course infections can run rampant. So I felt very secure in that environment.
And when you had these fevers and they admitted you, did you have any other symptoms? Did you know, because some people get, shakes and muscle pains, and some people have confusion
Right.
spells, neurotoxicity. Did you have any of that?
Not immediately. And I wish I could recall the precise timeline
We're
better.
glad that you can't recall. It's probably good. Yeah, it's probably
Yeah,
hard to remember. Yeah.
but the things that the way the side effects manifested themselves in me initially, it was with fever and fatigue, and then within the first week, there's the shakes, the tremoring. My hand. This is not my normal state, but this is how I was. My hands trembling, my and feeling. Am I stuttering a great deal, having difficulty getting words out? I was always cognizant of my surroundings. I never felt that I was drifting away to an alternative reality or anything like that. But as we approached the 1 month mark, I was hit with some very severe mental side effects. And this is what I've told people in our local chapter that I think patients should be aware of. And I've also made the Hopkins staff aware of it. I was the first CAR T transplant for CLL, but at Hopkins, so I was kind of that was a novelty, so to speak, I guess. But I had background of bipolar disorder, which had been dormant for about 16, 17 years. That is to say, my mood was completely stable for that long on medication. And I also had PTSD, having lived 3 years in a war zone, literally during my foreign service career, with a lot of horrific experiences that I sort of put on the shelf, because back in the 1990s, when I returned from my overseas assignment, that the State Department didn't consider that.
Yeah, we didn't know about post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
We knew about it, we ignored it. Yeah.
And but then suddenly, at about just before the 1 month mark, I started having flashbacks to some of the horrific experiences that I went through during my tour in war-torn Peru during the 1990s, and they became almost obsessive. I could not get them out of my mind, and that just as that was subsiding, then depression hit it, a very deep depression, so deep that at the 1 month mark, literally the day after I received the welcoming news that I had achieved complete remission, you would think that I would have been elated, but on the contrary, that's when I fell into the deepest part of the depression, and that was accompanied by severe fatigue, to the point that one morning I woke up and I really could not lift my limbs. I felt just completely done in, and that, coupled with the depression, I felt that I really couldn't go on anymore. I was just saying, okay, Lord, I don't want to live, like this. And of course, in the back of my mind, and I knew that this was transitory, and my wife kept reminding me, sweetie, this is transitory. But it's hard to accept that fully when you're experiencing it.
Right.
You can, part of your mind can tell you that, but that is not, at least in my case, was not the controlling part of my mind.
Yeah. And, it's not a fish that discovers water. When you're in the middle of it, it's hard to sort it out, So you went through this depression. It sounds like your wife was very important in terms of
Right.
keeping you
She
going.
was exceptionally supportive, because I'd say the depression at its most acute lasted less than a week. Nonetheless, I was in no shape to even do the fundamentals like cooking for myself, or she was literally for a couple of days there, walking down the stairs and up the stairs with me, because I was also still physically fatigued and still had the shakes, and want to make sure I didn't hurt myself or fall down the stairs. But again, she was extremely supportive. I think this reinforcing that message. This is transitory. This is transitory. Hey, remember, you're once you get out of this, you can look forward to the remission for however long God grants you that. That was of inestimable value to me. And of course, and then on the medication side of it, I emerged from the depression very suddenly. My psychiatrist intervened, and he recommended a small dose of Adderall, which I had certainly never associated with anything but ADHD.
Right, but it's an amphetamine-like medication.
Right.
It gives you energy and boosts your mood.
Right, and he gave me a very small dose, about 1/3 the dosage that people who take it for ADHD normally take. It was 7
deficit hyperactivity disorders. Yeah.
Right, it was just 7.5 milligrams spread out over the day. But it was almost, to me, almost miraculous in that one morning at my lowest, when I was just saying, God, I can't go on with this anymore. I can't get out of bed. But by about 1, 2 in the afternoon, I managed to get out of bed and take an Adderall. My wife had picked it up the night before, but I didn't want to start it night because I knew it would keep me up, or likely keep me up at night because, as you said, it's an amphetamine. I took it that next day, and within a half hour, my mood was lifting, began to lift, and within an hour or so, my mood had lifted almost to normal. And that plus a bump up in my medication I take for bipolar disorder, I was doing real well within 3 or 4 days. And so the takeaway from that for me and the folks at Hopkins agree is that, and I would recommend this to anyone contemplating the CAR T therapy, is that if you have a perhaps not only a history of mental illness as I do, but any other significant comorbidity, make sure that your oncologist is well aware of that. I mean, I was not asked about any mental health history to the best of my recollection, so I was not prepared for this. And I've since read one study from Massachusetts General saying that something along the order of 43% of all CAR T patients experience depression at roughly the 1 month mark, and or if they're so predisposed, also PTSD manifestations.
Right.
And when I read that, I thought, well, I was a clay pigeon. I was a sitting duck. And that would have been good to know that beforehand. I mean, not that I could have done anything differently, perhaps, but maybe my psychiatrist could have done something proactively. So again, I think it's very important to make your provider aware of any mental health history. In particular, in my case, you have, or maybe other comorbidities as well. What do you think, Doctor?
No, I think that that's critical. And I think the other takeaway is to ask for help. If you're depressed, talk to somebody who can help. Most patients don't have a psychiatrist, but they can talk to a primary care provider or their oncologist or get an appropriate referral.
Right.
It can be turned around with medications or with talking therapy or with other things like that. Ask for help and make sure you have a care partner who's watching you and saying, hey, like your wife was saying, this is transitory. We can get through this, and pushing you to try new things and do different things.
Exactly, pushing me. She was, I remember a few times I would get upset with her, say, honey, you can't will this away. It's not something you can will away. I need intervention of medication. That being said, her gently prodding me, come on, you can do it. That was critical help too, because it did to the extent I could control my mood. It did kind of shift me in the right direction.
And it sounds like the psychological part was the big issue for you. You had some neuro problems,
right?
And the fevers and the tremors and stuff.
The fever and the tremors in and of themselves, I mean, if that had been all, I would have considered a relative cakewalk. I mean, for a few days, I was unable to type without every other letter being a typo. But again, that would have been, to me, a very, very small price to pay.
And what about some people have had, their blood pressure drop or needed oxygen, or you didn't have any of that?
No, I didn't, fortunately.
Yeah. And so this passed, you're not that far out now. Where are things at? When they, what we call in medicine, restaged you, they repeated the blood test, you found out that there was no CLL. Did they also scan you again? And tell us what the results were when they checked you again.
The PET scan results showed complete remission, and I've been going in every week for blood tests to track the various levels. I had a immunoglobulin IVG procedure week before last because my levels were low, which I guess is typical for CAR T, but no other interventions beside that. And so I think physical a program of physical fitness of one degree or another beforehand, of course, I think probably sets you up better for it than otherwise. And I'm a pretty physically active person. I hiked 7 miles a day, 4 days a week, and then I also lift weights 4 days a week. And now we're just again at the 2 months, just a little over the 2 month mark, and I'm just this week I'm back to 7 miles again hiking, and I'm back to my pre-therapy workout level. Not to say you have to run out and start pumping iron or jogging or this or that, but again, I say this just to show that everything is transitory. And for me, it's been to get back up to full what I would call normalcy in terms of my physical activity and also my intellectual activities. I'd say it was just under 2 months.
Yeah. And we often say, you know, give me 1 or 2 months of misery and I can give you a very long, you know, remission, you know. And but to expect that there may be a difficult month or two, and it's not like every day during that time is miserable, but there can be some pretty miserable
No,
days.
it was. I'm glad you've said that, because it was kind of a little bit of a roller coaster when, apart from the depression, the physical manifestations, the shaking, the fatigue, that varied considerably at times from day to day. Some days I felt like I was 75% of myself, and other days 25%. And then again, when I hit bottom with the depression and the fatigue, felt about 5% myself. But it varied. It was not a straight line.
And you mentioned the good news that your scans were all back to normal and your blood work went back to normal. Did they also do a bone marrow biopsy and do you have that results?
No, they didn't.
They haven't done that yet, but they will at some point. I'm sure they will. Yeah.
And also, I guess I should mention that in case we don't think of it otherwise, you know, all your vaccines, of course, are wiped out, and you have to be revaccinated at the 6 month mark. Also, I have to wait until it's been 3 months since my treatment to get a COVID shot again. Get a, you know,
Right.
so the booster went out the window. But and so when I do go to the gym, I wear a mask. And if I try to still avoid large crowds, and if I'm going to be around a number of people, I do mask up. But otherwise, I'm living a pretty normal life.
And you're getting the intravenous immune globulin because it kills off the B cells, the cancerous B cells where the CLL lives, but also the healthy B cells that form antibodies, which why vaccines don't work as well, and you need the intravenous immune globulin replacement and whatnot. You've given a lot of really helpful advice and insights. Are there other things that you'd want to tell a patient about your journey or advice that you'd want to share with somebody who's considering CAR T in their CLL journey?
I would say to the extent you're able, tell yourself, or make sure your caregiver reminds you that everything is transitory. It will pass. Whatever side effects you experience, they will pass. Again, it was not all that comforting to me at the time, but it did help enough to, you know, keep me pushing along. Again, as I said earlier, I reiterate, any mental health issues you may have had, make your provider aware of that, because I guess the CAR T therapy, the side effects can, I mean, the cells seem to go for the weakest link in you, the weakest area, be it a physical ailment, maybe, you know, rheumatism, arthritis, lower back pain. In my case, it was a bipolar disorder and the PTSD. It'll go for that. So, you know, be prepared. And I think the importance of a good caregiver, whether it's a spouse or a sibling or a close friend, you know, it can't be overstated.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's extraordinarily helpful advice and a very insightful the way you see it.
And one last thing, if I could, Brian, what I was doing when I was at a not the depths of my depression, it was hard to do then, but generally I was trying to set goals for myself that, hey, I know that this fall we're going to Chicago to see my side of the family. beginning of the year, we're planning to go to Europe to see my wife's family. I've got among other things, I'm an author and historian. I've got a new book coming out next year. I can't, I gotta be around for that. So set goals for yourself. Think of things that in the medium, maybe long term that you're looking forward to. That helped. That helped.
Yeah. Uh, Peter, I can't thank you enough for these insights. I think they'll be incredibly valuable. It was gritty, but I think it's ultimately optimistic,
Yes.
It sounds like if you had to make the decision again, you would make the same decision.
I'd make the same decision. The only thing I change is, again, I would have, had I been aware of what the mental health side effects were, I would have obviously reached out to my psychiatrist and made the provider, aware of it. I mean, I've got the care I've received first rate. The level of concern by the folks at Hopkins has been phenomenal. But again, we're pioneers, so everybody's, I think, learning from this.
Well, Peter, thanks for being so open and blunt about this and not sugarcoating it. But I think that that's reality, and it's certainly better. I mean, people will learn from what you went through. People will learn from what I went through, and it just keeps getting better and better. The more people that are doing it. And when I had it, there was no commercial product. It was experimental, and now it's commercially available, and there's a consistency. And I think we're going to be seeing it used more and more with better and better results and better management of those adverse events. Again, I can't thank you enough. God
My
bless.
pleasure.
Hopefully this remission is extraordinarily durable, and you get years and years of
Knock on wood.
staying in the background. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.